Welcome back to another Star Mini Gaming YouTube video, and this is another video that's kind of in the line of the narrative reviews I've been doing on the Age of Sigmar, but this one is less about an individual book story and kind of, the specifics, and this is more of a broad stroke summary. Um, I've now read all but the newest Call of Archaon novel, so I've read all the ones that are more focused on the Stormcast. I haven't read all the um, short stories yet, and I obviously haven't read the or listened to, I guess, the fourth installment in GW's um, audio drama series that they've been putting out. So, because that's just not out yet at the time of this video. But I'm gonna go ahead and kind of tie together all the videos I have done and what I'm going to be doing over the next several weeks. I've got, oh my goodness, probably like about 8 more stories that I've read that I need to summarize and review. So we're going to start right here with this chart, and in the Age of Sigmar, in the novels so far, we have followed the stories of these different characters. The 3 that you'll see pictured here are probably the largest characters so far. They are the Lord Celestants for their different hosts. And in this graph, as you can see, like, we kind of have the chronological order of what takes place for each of these characters' stories, which is something that I really wanted to kind of put out there because on GW's website on the Black Library, I didn't realize that they were kind of listed in date of publication, like the newest to the oldest, and there was nothing that kind of gave me, there was no guide for what order to read them to kind of learn what was going on. So consequently, my narrative reviews have been out of order, which is changing. I just did the War in the Hidden Vale review this last week, and I will not be doing the second half of that book yet. I'm going to put that one off. The Eldritch Fortress, I'm going to put that off until I've covered all the stories that come before it from a chronological perspective. And then once I have kind of caught up to where the books are, I'll do another summary video like this that will summarize a bit more of like the story and where the war is. This is more of just kind of like helping you learn a little bit more about the major characters or the main characters in the Age of Sigmar so far, and kind of help you just consolidate all the information into one. So we're going to start with Vandus Hammerhand, who is the first amongst the Lord Celestants, and by that I simply mean that he's kind of the greatest amongst equals. Like all the Lord Celestants are technically the same rank, but thus far in the book series, Vandus seems to be the one that Sigmar favors the most. That he's the most capable of all of the commanders of Sigmar's armies. Um, so, in the situation where there's like 2 or more Lord Celestants, Vandus will normally kind of step into that leadership role, although they are technically of equal rank. As I said before, in the Gates of Azyr, he rides a Dracoth mount, which is the model from the starter kit. His warrior chamber is known as the Hammers of Sigmar. Um, the, I guess some of like the notable um, entourage that he has with him that you'll see consistently within the same novels as him that are attached to the Hammers of Sigmar is Ionis Cryptborn, the Lord Relictor. Depending on which of the warrior chambers that the story has focused on, we'll have other characters like Judicator or Liberator or Prosecutor Primes, which are basically like the equivalent of sergeants. Like they lead the individual squad, sometimes a few squads. And they might appear maybe consistently throughout a couple of the stories, but they're not mentioned more than a handful of times in each. They're not really a major character. Um, they're just a character that, you know, that is consistent within it. But Ionis Cryptborn as the Lord Relictor is a major character. A lot of the chapters will focus and revolve around him in the stories. And in some of the other ones, you won't necessarily focus on the Lord Relictor. They might focus on the Lord Castellant, which is the model with the little bird dog Gryph-hound and the halberd and lantern. Um, some others focus on more of like the Knight Azirs or the Knight Venators, which are the two different um, kits that are the two different models you can build from the Flying Commander kit. The Venator has the bow. The Aziris has the lantern. Vandus has the honor of being the one to lead the initial assault into the realm of fire, and not really just the realm of fire, but he is literally the first commander of the first Stormcast Eternals in the war against Chaos. Chaos has come and they've conquered the 8 realms. Obviously, they haven't gotten to the realm of heaven, and it is Vandus who is the first one who kind of introduces Chaos through the pounding of his hammer to say, "Hey, we're here and we're a force to be reckoned with." His kind of major nemesis thus far has been Korghos Khul, Lord of the Gortide. So if you have the Age of Sigmar starter box and you look, for example, in the kind of supplemental rulebook that has all the different war scrolls in it, background information, things like that, that's kind of extra. Um, and you see the formations that are within that, the Gortide that is within that book. Those are designed to represent Korghos Khul's forces, and Korghos Khul is, of course, the commander from that starter kit that comes with the Fleshhound. Later on in the stories, Vandus Hammerhand joins up with Thostis Bladestorm whenever they are searching for Gal Maraz within the realm of metal. Um, so, Thostis is another one of these major Lord Celestants that we will be covering. He's um, not as like major of a character as Vandus thus far, but he's still a major one. I just wanted to kind of point out how those two end up joining forces. Like they each have their own novel line that's basically tracing them, and then in the book, whenever they find Gal Maraz, it's just such a significant event that they take these two main characters and basically put them together. But in that story, Vandus being the more central character to the story of Age of Sigmar, kind of takes the lead in the book. Vandus, due to a series of events that I will be covering in my next narrative review, gains the ability to, from time to time, see visions of the future. And at first, he's not able to control these, but eventually, to a degree, he is. They still leave him kind of weakened and exposed while he's having the vision, but he learns how to kind of summon them when he needs them, as opposed to them just happening pretty much randomly. The second Lord Celestant that we have is Thostis Bladestorm, who has not been as in-depthly developed as a character as some of these others, but he does appear repeatedly in the books, and he does have, as you saw in that first slide, he does have a few books that are one book that's focused entirely around him as the central character, and another book where he's kind of that second central character to only Vandus. Um, he leads the Celestial Vindicators, which is all of the Stormcasts in Age of Sigmar are broken up into different groups, different warrior chambers, and each of the warrior chambers takes on kind of the personality of their leader. And Thostis and the Celestial Vindicators Their armor is kind of a uh, what's the word I'm looking for? It's kind of like a blue green, kind of a teal. I don't really know exactly how to describe it, but color, and they are very aggressive, sometimes to a fault, as opposed to Vandus, who is more calculated in his attacks. Thus far, Thostus has squared away against Tzeentch forces in the realm of metal, and he does end up winning, but it takes some time because he is facing off against the local sorcerer who kind of rules the land, who is basically just a lackey of Kairos Fateweaver. Then we have Gardus, who was initially my favorite. I still really like Gardus, but Vandus has, as I've read more of his books and seen more of the development as a character, has probably become my favorite of the Stormcast Lord Celestants. But Gardus is the leader of the Hallowed Knights. They are silver, where the Hammers of Sigmar, which are the ones that you see the most prominently. They're silver, where the Hammers of Sigmar are gold, and their blue is a little bit deeper of a blue. They fight Nurgle's forces in the realm of life in two of the stories. One of which being the one that I just reviewed, the War in the Hidden Vale. They fight the Maggoth Lords and the Glotken, as those are the Nurgle forces there, and the greater unclean one of Nurgle Bolithrax. Gardus had, as you know from the War in the Hidden Vale, escaped Nurgle's garden, and gains, much like Vandus, visions of the future as a result. They're not exactly the same. It's not exactly the same how like they kind of come upon them, and they don't really convey the exact same thing. Like Gardus basically gains the knowledge of, where some hidden things are that leads to finding Alarielle, and Vandus has more visions of the future in terms of like battles that will happen, and just like great events like of his own destiny that may or may not come to pass depending on how he approaches it. So their visions are different, even though they both have them. Gardus allies with the Sylvaneth and Alarielle, who is, of course, Lord of the Sylvaneth and the entire realm of life, in their fight against Nurgle. And then, much like Vandus, who has Ionis Cryptborn, Gardus has the Lord Castellan Grimm, who is kind of that secondary character who is always real central to the story whenever Gardus is present, and plays a really major role in their Stormcast force. And the Lord Castellan Grimm and the Lord Relictor of that Warrior Chamber, which I can't remember off the top of my head what his name is because he's a much more minor character for them. They come to foresee the death of Gardus at the hands of Bolithrax. And basically, whenever a Stormcast dies in combat, Sigmar basically uses his lightning to kind of like reclaim their soul and their body and reforge them once again into a new Stormcast Eternal ready to fight again. But there are certain ways that can be prevented. So if they're not killed in combat, if they're basically just trapped within something, maybe where they won't die, or if they are trapped in the warp, for example, they cannot be reclaimed by Sigmar. They're gone for good. And so Grimm sees Gardus dying to Bolithrax and being basically thrown into the warp, to where his soul can never come back. And so whenever in combat he sees this vision coming to pass, he grabs the crossbow from Adjudicator next to him and shoots Gardus and kills him to prevent that from coming to pass, so that Gardus' soul is able to return to Azyr to be reforged as opposed to being lost in the warp. And then the fourth Lord Celestant that we've seen thus far is Tarsus the Bullheart. Now the interesting thing is that he also leads the Hallowed Knights, which leads me to believe that one of two things is true. either one, a large amount of time passes before Gardas can be reforged and come back to lead the Hallowed Knights, or two, that these warrior chambers are actually so large that there are multiple Lord Celestants that are perhaps of varying ranks when compared to each other. So to equate it to, for example, like the American military, you have your different generals of varying stars, 1 through 4, or 5 if it's in a time of war. And so while they're all generals, there is the hierarchy. And perhaps we have the first indication of that here, that there are Lord Celestants within the same warrior chambers of a different level in hierarchy. So he, like I said, also leads the Hallowed Knights. He journeys into the realm of death to seek an audience with Nagash to try to get Nagash to come forth and ally with the Stormcast forces and with Sigmar, of course, as Nagash did once so long ago. Um, Although Nagash did betray Sigmar um, in the olden days whenever that did happen, but Sigmar's willing to put that behind him because he needs every ally that he can. Tarsus meets up with Manfred von Karstein and forms a very shaky alliance with him. Um, Basically, the entire time, Tarsus is expecting Manfred to double cross him, and Manfred's demeanor does kind of lead credence to that. You know that's going to come. And Tarsus also, different ones of the Lord Celestants and other characters throughout the story will sometimes have visions of their past before they became a Stormcast. Depending on, you know, the different Stormcasts, they may or may not have these and they may or may not be bothered by them. Vandus in the initial book does kind of see his life prior to being a Stormcast, and he has to kind of um, put the rest the ghost of his past, and that helps elevate him to becoming a greater leader. Tarsus has a similar experience. In the realm of death, Tarsus comes to learn that he did dwell in the realm of death before he was a Stormcast, and he was actually a prince in what was quite possibly the greatest city in the entire realm. And he died in combat whenever the city fell to Khorne's forces, to a Bloodthirster specifically. Um, so that's him. Then we have the first major character or central character that is not a Lord Celestant. We have the Celestant Prime himself. And now, unlike the Lord Celestants, there's only one Celestant Prime. He is the champion of Sigmar. His true identity is unknown. He just goes by the name of the weapon he wields, which is Ghal Maraz. We discover in his story that the events that have been taking place within the book that he is going through, he keeps on having these kind of deja vu moments, and he's not sure if he's being given foresight by Sigmar or if he has lived through this before. And at the end of the story, it's confirmed that he has lived through these events before. Basically, he's been undergoing a trial over and over again to determine whether or not he is ready to, number one, to truly be ready to wield Ghal Maraz, because he needs to be as incorruptible as the hammer itself. And number two, if he's at a place where he can go out and kind of be that champion of Sigmar and turn the tide wherever he's needed. He is a quite impressive warrior, as at one point he defeats 2 Bloodthirsters at once by himself, and destroys a Lord of Change known as the Prismatic King, who, you know, we don't really know the Prismatic King's power level compared to other beings in the Warhammer universe, because, you know, we have such a small sample size and no one else like Kairos is present. But the Prismatic King, from what we do have, what evidence we do have, does appear to be quite powerful and perhaps near the level of Kairos. And then we have the final Lord Celestant that, well, really the final character that any of these novels have really centered on, and this is Tylos Stormbound. And he also fights within the realm of fire, and he too rides the Dracoth like Vandus. in many ways, he seems to be like a miniature Vandus. He's not the man that Vandus is. He's not the commander that Vandus is. While he is still skilled, he is still brave. He does have his faults, and he's just not on the same plane. He's a lesser commander. He his brother is the Lord Relictor, Boreas the Undying, which is interesting because this is the first time, number one, that we've seen like two members of the same family being reforged into Sigmar's army, let alone serving together. And they fight the Khorne warlord Hawk. Um, it's a very strange name. Basically makes me think of like hacking cough. And Hawk is not a particularly impressive commander by any stretch of the imagination. And Tylos, in his story, we come to learn that each of the realms do not have only a single realm gate, they have perhaps several, because the one that Vandus captures in the Gates of Azir is still being held by the Stormcast, but Tylos and his warrior chamber are dispatched to destroy or convert another one, because some of them have been corrupted by chaos to where they only lead directly to whatever Chaos Lord's realm. So, for example, the one in the story has been taken over by forces of Khorne, and so it leads directly into Khorne's domain. And that's all the central characters that we've had in the story so far. Um, like I said, this isn't meant to be an exhaustive study of all the characters. This is just meant to kind of consolidate the information on each of them so that as you watch the reviews or perhaps even read the novels or listen to the audiobooks of them yourself, that you kind of have an idea of who the character is, what they've accomplished, what they've been through, and also to help you to kind of figure out, if you're interested, in what order to read the books, to get you a full picture of the story without necessarily providing any spoilers for yourself. Obviously, you won't be watching all my reviews if you are hoping to avoid that, or if you just want to follow the kind of the progression of the war as it goes, what order of the novels to read. And this is not going to be replacing my narrative review this week. This is going to be in addition to everything else. So until next time, this is James, and happy gaming.